Hey everybody, today's lesson is going to go over how to make sure your paper flows well. Now, our focus is going to be on creating a thesis statement that acts as a roadmap for the rest of your essay. And then also we're going to talk about using transitions in a way that allows us to go from one idea to the next seamlessly and to make it feel like it's not so choppy. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is going to be making sure your reader knows where you're going. And you're going to do this by really doing a good job of setting up your theme statement and your thesis statement. So your thesis statement is going to act as a roadmap for your paper. And in this assignment, you are going to need to incorporate your theme statement into your thesis. Now, that might seem like a lot. So some of you have a little bit longer of theme statements. So you might be thinking, well, how am I going to have a theme statement plus a 3-point thesis statement all in one sentence? So for the purpose of this paper, it is completely acceptable to have your theme statement be the second to last sentence in your introduction, and then your thesis statement is always going to be the last sentence of your introduction paragraph. So let's take a look at the formula here. So basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to state your theme, and then you're going to list where we see that theme in the novel, and specifically it should address the 3 different paragraphs that you are going to be writing. So, for example, you're going to be writing a paragraph about a symbol that embodies your theme. You're going to be writing a paragraph about a character that embodies your theme, and then you're going to have a paragraph that addresses a real-world connection to your theme. All right, now, note, this is not an exact formula that I've given you here. You may have to play around with the wording to make sure, 1, it makes sense, and 2, that it's not too wordy. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example here. So in this example, I've made it so that my theme statement is the second to last sentence in my introduction, and then my thesis statement is the last sentence. So here's my theme statement. I said, in the story, the reader sees how the desire for power can cloud a person's conception of right and wrong, especially when people fear losing their power. So that's my theme. Then for my thesis, I say this theme comes to light while examining the symbol of the knothole, questioning Walter Cunningham's actions, and comparing situations in the story to today's political climate. Now, one thing I want you to notice is that the 3 different topics that I'm going to focus on in each paragraph are listed here, and it's in the order that you're going to see the paragraphs in my essay. So for example, the knothole is listed first here in my thesis statement, and therefore paragraph 1 is going to focus on the knothole and how it's a symbol of maintaining power over people. My second paragraph and the second thing listed in my thesis statement is Walter Cunningham's actions and how his actions indicate that there's this fear of losing power, and it offers us insight into the theme. And then my third paragraph is going to connect how these examples in the story connect thematically with the political climate today. All right, so that's the most important part of your thesis statement. You want to make sure you are listing the 3 main focal points of each of your essays. From there, you're going to want to double check and make sure that you've included transitions in your paper. Now, all of us know what transitions are. You've talked about these since you were younger. A lot of times you learn transitions in the form of what words you can use to transition. So, for example, if you're trying to explain to somebody a step-by-step process, you would say, first, you do this. Then you do that. Next, you do this. Okay, those are examples of transitions. Now, this presentation is going to be in your Buzz agenda, so you can access the document I'm about to pull up here, and it references different purposeful transitions. So I'm going to pull that document up here. So if you're struggling with how to transition from one idea to the next, it might be helpful to reference this document. And the first thing you need to ask yourself is, how do these ideas connect with one another? So for example, if I'm looking at 2 different instances of isolation in this story, am I comparing those examples? If so, I might use a transitional sentence that starts with likewise or similar to such and such situation this also occurs. So you also want to include transitions to avoid sharp turns in your essay. Now, if you don't use transitions, your essay is going to seem like it's all over the place. And in other words, it's going to seem like you're making sharp turns or quick subject changes, and it's going to make it hard to follow, and it's going to make it very difficult for your reader to see how the ideas build off of one another and how the ideas prove your point in the end if you're just giving a bunch of random examples and not showing how the ideas connect. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. And I'll give you some potential examples that you might run into. So places you'll need transitions are between different pieces of evidence. So within your body paragraphs, you're going to have at least 2 to 3 pieces of evidence. So you want to make sure that those pieces of evidence connect in some way. They're not going to be the same examples, but there should be a way that connects all of them together. So for example, if you're discussing Scout's privilege in a paragraph, and the first example you're giving is the instance of molasses, where Scout is completely oblivious to her own privilege. And then your next example is about how she starts to recognize her own privilege when she goes to Calpurnia's church and she realizes that many people in the Black community can't read, and reading is something that she just takes advantage of. She never has realized that that was an opportunity that she had that people in the Black community did not have. So think about how you would transition from an example talking about Scout and the molasses incident to how you would then go into talking about how Scout recognizes her privilege in the example with Calpurnia's church. So here are a couple options of what you could do. After you've analyzed the quote that you've selected for the molasses incident, you may say something like, unlike the instance where Scout is unable to recognize her own privilege, later on in the story when she visits Calpurnia's church, she starts to question her privilege and how it's impacted her life. All right. So that could be a way that I transition. I contrast how those instances, while both being instances of privilege, I contrast and point out how they're different and how even they show evolution for Scout and how she deals with her own privilege throughout the story. Now, I'm also going to need to transition between paragraphs. So how you can do this is you can set it up by either using the last sentence of the previous paragraph as a transitional sentence, or you can incorporate a transition into your topic sentence of the following paragraph. So here's an example. It says, if your first paragraph is about how the Radley House is symbolic of isolation, how are you going to transition to your second paragraph that discusses Mayella Ewell's isolation? In my case, I'm going to use the last couple of sentences in my body paragraph about the Radley House to transition to the next paragraph about Mayella Ewell. So here's an example of what my last couple sentences can look like and how I'm going to tie Mayella Ewell to it. Harper Lee uses the deteriorating Radley House to symbolize the impact isolation has on people over time. The deterioration of the house parallels the physical toll isolation has taken on Boo Radley. However, the consequences of isolation are not only physical, they can be emotional consequences as well. This emotional deterioration can be seen in Mayella Ewell. So, I've transitioned, I've shown, okay, the house symbolizes the physical deterioration and the physical toll isolation has on people, and then I'm transitioning to my paragraph to talk about Mayella Ewell, and I'm talking now about the emotional toll that isolation has on people. Now, again, it doesn't matter. You can do it in the final sentence of your previous paragraph or the first sentence or your topic sentence of the following paragraph. You just need to make sure you're showing how those ideas come together, because if I just went from talking the Radley House to talking about Mayella Ewell, I'm not showing how those ideas tie in. Instead, because of how I've written it, I'm showing that this paragraph is addressing this physical toll, and now I'm moving into talking about the emotional toll that being isolated has on people. All right, that's that for making sure your paper flows well. Make sure you're taking a look at your own essay. See if you can figure out where you need transitions. Again, it should be between the examples you give and between your paragraphs. Do your best with it. It's like a puzzle, right? So you need to figure out how all the pieces fit together. If you have questions or need help, be sure to ask. And then another strategy for just making sure everything transitions well is to read your paper out loud. Maybe even read your paper to somebody at home, mom, dad, I don't know, cat. And then listen to see if you notice it's choppy or notice that it flows well together. All right. Thank you for watching, and I will talk with you soon.